Hey folks, Steve here with another Fall of the Third Reich video. I changed the camera settings on my camera once again. I don't know if this will be any better. I have not added an additional light yet because I want to see if I can just get the lighting right for the camera without resorting to that. The saga of my video camera settings and the lighting in here is a weird one. Because I had soft yellow lights, now I have brighter white lights in here, fluorescent white lights that changes the color tone of the room. And I had my video camera set to a setting in the old days with the yellow softer lights that didn't work well, and so I changed the video settings for that. But then adding the white lights messed with the video settings from then, so now I've reverted them back to what they used to be. But I think this mode works better with the white lights. So you guys let me know what you think of the light quality at the moment. And if this is better than before, cool, let me know. If it's worse for you, let me know. And I'll continue to do what I can. If it means I need to add a light box to the room when recording, I can do that. I have one. I just don't like it because it makes it too bright for me when I'm just playing the game here. So for me, outside the camera, it all looks the same to me. Looking at the camera pop out, and seeing what you guys see, it's just harder to tell how that translates to a bigger screen, however you're watching this on your phone or on the computer. So I don't know. Let me know. But in this video, guys, we're going to be looking at turn 4. As we get started, just an FYI, from the comments on previous videos around the swamps, near Syracuse and Anzio and sort of the questions on that, I made a dedicated video about that. I had done some research for geographic features of those areas to kind of understand, does it make sense to have those hexes be swamp hexes. For our game purposes, we're going to play the game as is, but if you're interested in that research, and it wasn't deep research, by the way, but just some cursory knowledge collection from sources I had, you can go watch that video. It's on the channel. It was uploaded right before this video, though this one's going to take a long time to upload, I guess. So I don't know. It's available as the time I'm recording this, so go watch that if it interests you. If you are really annoyed by Syracuse and Anzio being swamp hexes, go watch that and take stock of what I learned, and maybe that will make you feel better about what this game does for that. Anyway. Yeah, we're going to get into turn 2, or I'm sorry, not turn 2, turn 4. This is the second quarter of the game, of 12 turns. So, if we're making a football metaphor, American football metaphor, we'd be entering the second quarter. And so far, I don't think I can make heads or tails of who's really winning, if only because the Western Allies are clogged up, but the Soviets are doing very well due to my poor Axis gameplay. And I compared my progress with the historical sort of front lines, and the way it works out is if you count from like January 1944, I'm a little bit ahead in the north because these guys, they were still around Leningrad. We've pushed west from Leningrad. But the actual front line in the south actually is more through here than back here, which is what it presently is. So in terms of territory, I'm ahead in one area, I'm maybe behind a few hexes in another. I think the big difference is the configuration of the front line and what units are where. I mean, we're in really rough shape as the Germans. It's a disaster. So that's maybe the one big difference. The territory doesn't necessarily tell you the whole situation. We're going to see a lot of units go poof here on the Axis side, and it's going to be a real bad time in general. They got to keep pulling back. So I guess there's that. Couple of things for this turn. This would be the first turn where it matters if we were playing with the winter optional rules. And what that really boils down to for our purposes would be that OKH and OKW and Stavka markers deployed are deployed on their town side no matter if they're in a city or a town. So what that means is less units in general will be activating. I'm not sure that really represents winter, but That's the way to look at it, and that has a couple of things. One, it makes it harder for the Soviets to do a lot. They have less they can do because their ranges of their Stavka marker are reduced. But you might think, okay, well, that sounds like it's probably Axis-sided. The reality is that OKH is affected as well. So where we might try to plug the 4 marker in a city and get 8 hexes range to activate a bunch of Axis units to try to retreat, the same problem exists in Winter for the Axis. They can't activate as many units. They're going to have a harder time getting out to the units that need to pull back. So it's almost like, online, people read it like, oh, this is an Axis helping option, and maybe it is in some contexts, but for ours, I suspect it's going to be real gnarly either way. So I think I am going to play with the Winter rule there, and we'll see what that does to the game situation. I will say, based on what I've played so far, I respect that this game has its own skill sort of floor and ceiling where you might be okay at other Hex and Counter games, but what's really important at being good at this game, on the East Front at least, and probably in other parts, is how are you managing your command markers given the logistical infrastructure that you have access to. I think that's going to be the difference between like someone who's going to do very well at this game and the person who's going to do very badly at this game, is how well do you manage that on the East Front. And the West Front and the Mediterranean, that might matter still a lot. But here, it seems really critically important. If you're not good at that, if you don't understand the importance of cities and where to hold, where to pull back, when to pull back, especially before it's too late, that is where your skill gain will be. You can develop some skill in the specific game system that is a little bit different than some other Hex and Counter game where you're given full capability to move everyone perfectly and attack with everyone perfectly all the time. Those command markers really make a big difference. And I really do appreciate that. It is weird. It's unlike a lot of other games. It's different than the Dark Valley, even. A game by the same designer, that Zocs are effectively really hard to disengage out of. You can't just slip away. And I think like the Dark Valley would kind of be that game mechanic might solve some weirdness that I found with the Dark Valley, where you can simply slip away all the time as the defender in that game. Well, if you have this mechanic where like you can't just simply leave an enemy Zoc as an infantry unit unless certain conditions apply, I think that would help massage some of the challenges there. But of course, in this game, not being used to that mechanic has made this a challenge to figure out how do I save the German army, and I'm failing at doing that evidently. Or if I want to be the more optimistic and congratulatory perspective, or use that congratulatory perspective, I'm really good as the Soviets. We'll say it that way. I'm really good at attacking as the Soviets. We can do that. So Winter will apply here. That does not do anything to the Schaeff Western Ally markers in terms of supply, throwing supply out a certain range. So really, it's not an issue for the Western Allies. Winter is not an issue for them. It is an issue for the Germans, but that won't really be too terribly relevant in the Mediterranean theater, because we're still locked up in Sicily. I mean, there's no getting around that. And it doesn't, the weather stuff doesn't even do anything to combat, right? It's simply a restriction on command markers, which is interesting. There's one thing that's worth talking about here more than before, which is, namely, we are in 1944 now. We are at the beginning of 1944. And that comes with it some changes to our replacement table setup. So the U.S.-French, this is kind of interesting. Like, you would think maybe the replacement rate would increase for the Allies over time, but it actually decreases. And for the Axis, it kind of decreases, but it also has a peak. So the U.S. and French replacement points won't change. Neither will the British, at least for 1944. So the next, 6 turns or so, the last 3 turns I think are 45. The Soviets actually go down to 8 instead of 10. So I can tell you that's going to have some effect on what they're able to build back, certainly. The minor axis goes down by 1. So it's going to be a lot harder to get Italians back on the board or Romanians back on the board. As they're lost, that'll eventually go to 0. And I guess the Soviets will eventually go to 6, which is not a lot, by the way. Whereas the Germans actually go up. They're going to get 3 per factory. So effectively, instead of getting 8 before from their 4 factory hexes, they're going to get 12. And that's a pretty big increase, right? If from 8 to 12, that's like a 50% increase in your replacement capability. So yeah, we've damaged the Germans a lot, but these next 6 turns, they're actually going to have a pretty nice set of replacement points, more than any other faction, individually anyway. And then they're still going to get reinforcements, so they're going to get that help, and then they're going to go down to 2 in 1945. And the only way we can affect that is to continue to do Allied bombing, which hopefully should kick that number down from 12 to 10 or 12 to 9 or something if we roll really well. That Allied bombing is going to be really important. Or we try to take a factory hex, but we're nowhere near them. So that's going to be the one big change-up, I think, this turn for the next several turns. That, yeah, we're slamming the Germans, but they are actually going to get better replacement points across the board. So, we'll see how it all plays out from there. Okay, that's a long intro. I apologize for that. I wanted to talk through all those different things because I felt they were all some level of importance. I'm going to take care of the reinforcement reinforcement phase, and we'll do strategic air before I do replacements, so we can at least get that set up. So I'll be right back, and I'll talk about where the reinforcements went and what the strategic air situation will be. Okay, so the Allied reinforcements, the Axis didn't get any reinforcements this turn, but the Allies all went into the England box, so we have several new units in the England box. We have a whole bunch of stuff in the England box. All a bunch of guys sitting around not doing a whole lot, preparing for D-Day later in the year, really. The Soviets got a armor unit, which they put into Gamel over here, so just more mechanized firepower. And now for the strategic air phase. So something I had read on Consim World seemed to indicate that when the Germans rebuilt their air unit during the replacement phase, that it should have been assigned to a theater box when it was rebuilt, rather than just it being available but not assigned like I did. That seemed to be what Consim World indicated in a comment that was very old. I didn't do that. It's too late to fix it. So if we have any Luftwaffe units that are destroyed and we decide to rebuild them, we will assign them to be used in a theater box. Effectively, that might have meant that the Germans missed out on support in the Mediterranean theater. Not that they really needed it, because so far things have worked out okay for them. So just something to keep in mind. So we have the same Luftwaffe assignments as we did before. One in the home box, one in the Med, one on the Eastern Front. There's one change. One of the reinforcements for the Allies is the 8th Air Force. So while the 15th Air Force in the Mediterranean is conditional on us reaching the Foggia town hex, we just get the 8th Air Force. And this is the American Air Force planes, getting stationed in England to be used for bombing campaigns. They have sort of the same area of effect as the British Bomber Command. They are focused in and around Northwest Europe. But they have some additional capabilities that Bomber Command does not have. So I'm going to zoom in over there a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So ordinarily, we would have Bomber Command do factory bombing. Bomber Command can do carpet bombing of Northwest Europe, which is used to provide attack bonuses to combat in a particular hex. And you can also do Interdiction, which I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure I saw much use in doing Interdiction. Let's see. Okay, Interdiction weakens German attacks, so it's sort of like, I guess, interdicting supplies. The Germans are attacking with some reduced effectiveness. It's actually quite potent. Um, and some of those, if they're successful, are theater-wide. So the interdiction actually is very powerful. Now, there's not much for Bomber Command to do because we're not on the continent. The 8th Air Force has additional options. So it can do transit bombing, which means that it removes transit points from the target theater, which means like they can't do strategic movement as much in that theater. And it can also do oil bombing, which basically affects the number of OKW and OKH markers, or the values of the OKW, OKH markers that the Germans can get. So oil bombing could be pretty effective, and the transit bombing could also be effective depending on what the situation is. So we have gained, as the Allies, some more capability. Most of those still are not terribly relevant for the moment because there's just not a whole lot for us to target. I think the real question is, if we have Bomber Command on the factory bombing and we put the 8th Air Force on factory bombing, what would that do? Well, that would allow us to roll twice, and both could have their own distinct effects on the replacement rate of the Germans, or we could split it and have Bomber Command do the factory bombing and have the 8th Air Force do oil bombing to restrict the ability for the Germans to respond to what's going on the East Front, right? You can start to see where that strategic element really is coming into play. Now, this is a tough choice. Either way, we're going to be contending with some Luftwaffe responses, because both factory bombing and oil bombing are modified by the home defense Luftwaffe unit. And if the Allies controlled some of the oil hexes, that would also have an improved effect on the oil bombing. Knowing that the Germans are getting so many more replacement points these next couple of turns, I think it's worthwhile trying to bomb their factories even more. So what I think I'm going to do is have the 8th Air Force also do factory bombing. I think that makes the most sense in this context, and knowing that we need to keep the German replacement rate down as much as possible so that the Germans can continue to drain, or the Soviets can continue to drain the German manpower, since we're having such a hard time in the South. If we were doing a poorer job as the Soviets, my camera's screwed up. Hey, I'm not sure why it does that. I need a new video camera someday. So the thinking is, if the Germans were doing better, and I really needed to help the Soviets out in terms of beating up the Germans, maybe we would focus on the oil bombing to restrict the Germans' ability to move and attack. Then the Soviets could make use of that. The Soviets are doing so well that I want to capitalize on the broken lines and reduce the Germans' ability to put new guys in the field to plug those holes. So that's the strategic decision I'm making here. We'll see how well it works out. Okay, so we did the strategic air. So now we're going to get right into that factory bombardment segment. So a couple of things that are different this turn than the last turn. Because it's 1944 and there's a Luftwaffe home defense present, each die roll will have a -3 rather than a -4. So you can imagine, like, already just for time expiring, our likelihood of doing well in our factory bombing is going to get better. In fact, it's going to help ensure that we don't roll really terribly bad and have to rebuild our bomber units. So when you have multiple air forces assigned, you're going to roll one die for each of the air units assigned. The effects of each die roll are judged separately. Okay. So we'll see what happens. What we could end up seeing is multiple Luftwaffe units destroyed, because we have to like finish processing the bombing each and every way through. So first we'll roll for Bomber Command, which will be the Commonwealth one, and we're going to roll a die. We're going to subtract 3 from it, and hope we roll a 6. And I rolled a 6. There you go. So let's adjudicate that, right? We have 6 minus 3 is 3. So subtract that number of replacement points and eliminate the Luftwaffe home defense at end of segment. Oh, okay, so if it's the end of the segment, maybe... Okay, so this is where I could see errata might need to come into play. So I don't know. It says that like the air bombardment table says that you eliminate the Luftwaffe home defense at end of segment, but we have another die roll, and the roll book says to eliminate that Luftwaffe immediately. I'm going to choose to follow the rolls more than the aid chart, because I know that the aid chart had more errata than the rolls really did. So we'll adjudicate that appropriately here. So first we'll have this eliminated, and I'll just set it here. Then we would have the Luftwaffe reassigned from the Mediterranean to the home front. And keep in mind, we've lost 3 replacement points already, and now we'll do the same roll for the 8th Air Force, minus 3. We hope to get another 6. Okay, instead I rolled a 3. So a 3 minus 3 is a 0 result. No effect. Okay, and that's it. So what have we accomplished? Well, the American Air Force didn't do much. So they're good at amphibious invasions. They're not so good at bombing. The Commonwealth right now are terrible at naval invasions, amphibious invasions, but they're okay at bombing. We've managed to pull a Luftwaffe unit away from the Mediterranean front to protect the home front, and we've hit the German replacement rate for 3. So instead of 12, they're going to get 9, which is still 1 more than they did last turn, but I'll take that. That's good enough for me. Okay, so then we'll execute the replacement phase. So I'll do all of that off camera, but to remind folks kind of where we're going to sit with that, the Germans will have 9, the Minor Axis will have 1, the Soviets will have 8, the British will have 4, and the US, French will have 6. So when we come back, we'll see kind of where things stand at that point. The nice thing for the Allies is that they didn't have any of their bomber units shot down, so they don't need to spend replacement points getting that back. Meanwhile, the Germans will have to if they want to keep their Luftwaffe in the game, and I think they do, but it's terribly expensive to do it. We'll see what happens. We'll be right back. Okay, I lied. I have one other thing that I need to mention that's important. Now that we're in 1944, the German Panzer replacement points, which can be used each turn, is now just 33% of the total replacement points after the effects of factory bombing have been determined. So, of the 9 replacement points, instead of getting 50% of those being able to be used on Panzer units, armored units, we can only use 33%, which comes out to be 3. So while we do have a slight improvement in the number of replacement points for the Germans, period, less of them can be spent on armor units, which will become more important, I guess, as time goes on here in this critical stage of the war where we need those armor Zocs to seal up the Soviets. So there you go. Okay, we'll be back in a second. Okay, so we took care of the replacement phase. And as we're going to go past the Allied invasion phase because we don't have any invasion markers to use, and we're keeping our existing invasion markers where they are to facilitate the continued advance into Sicily as the Allies. What it doesn't seem it does not seem you're allowed to do like an invasion move to a beachhead marker with units in your Mediterranean box or England box during this step. If I could, I would. I would try to get some of my British units into the beachhead behind our guys in Palermo, but it does not appear we can actually do that. We have to wait for other movement phases. So we are still kind of bottled up in Sicily. It's awfully, it's kind of a bummer because I see other people and they're like, playing this game and they're like, up here fighting against the line of Germans there by this time of the game, and we're just not there. We just don't have it right now, and we have to make do with what we got. The fact that Italy is operating, this far into the game, it's remarkable. I did forget to do a reinforcement, and we spent our minor axis reinforcement on an Italian unit. That might not be the best choice. I maybe should do Romania, but we'll see if I can get some guys. Well, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't do Italy. I'm rethinking this now. I think we are going to do Romania. Because there's no way I can get a unit now into Syracuse down here. Because once we come into this hex, we're in a Zoc, and we can't move from Zoc to Zoc. So I can't get any more guys into Syracuse at all, really. I just don't have an option. So I'll put a new Romanian unit in Romania, and that will be good enough. Anyway, okay. So the Western Allies basically got their guys out of the eliminated box into the available box for the Med. They're topped off. I do think what I could do, actually, at least with the U.S. unit, and this is how reinforcements are set up. I should have changed my thinking here. Newly arriving Allied reinforcements in England may be placed with any beachhead currently on the map or any Allied control port, blah, 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 as long as enemies are not occupying the hex. Newly arriving Allied reinforcements in the Med may be placed stacked with any beachhead within Allied beachhead nationality restrictions currently on the map, or any Allied controlled port in the Med or Balkans only. So actually, I could, because I rebuilt this U.S. unit, he could come into Gala, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we at least get one unit out of there. The other Commonwealth units were either starting in the box or needed to be replenished in the box. So technically, I don't think I could plug them. I can't plug in with Palermo because that port is full. I guess I would potentially put them into the landing hex there, but really I want those units well prepped for another invasion attempt at Syracuse if we don't take it this turn. So we did make use of that. So the Americans get one of their mech corps into Sicily to help take Syracuse from behind. That's the plan there. The Axis replacements basically all went to the East Front. We have some armory units that I brought in, a two-stepper and a one-stepper here. Their goal is to do operational movement all the way east as far as they can go to kind of help plug up some of the problem areas. I need to decide how we want to deal with the marshes here. Either plug a unit in that is still in supply or have guys set up around it. We'll need to figure that out. And some infantry also over here. So everything that we can, we're going to send to the East Front, and we did rebuild the destroyed Luftwaffe, and we put it in the Mediterranean front. I think I said last video I wouldn't do that, but once we start losing Luftwaffe units, it just gets really bad from there, and like we could essentially have like 0 replacement points eventually on a turn, and that sounds very bad as the Germans, so that's what we did. Okay. So we were done with replacements. Oh, by the way, the Soviets had several. They could not build. They basically had 2 infantry left in their dead pile after reinforcements, and they just kind of went. I put some up here to kind of help reinforce the Leningrad line, and along some places along here. We used Orel actually as a reinforcement point that will be a jumping off point to attack the Germans this turn. So all looking good there. So again, no Allied invasion. We're going to go right to the OKW, OKH phase, purchasing and placement. And again, what's important here is wherever we put the OKW and OKH markers, no matter if they go in a city, they will stay in the town side. So there you go. We'll figure that out. Okay, I think we're good to go. The Axis is using all 7 points on the Eastern Front, obviously, and we're going to have the 4 here on the town side to get some of these guys pulled back, and then I put a 3 right here to clean up around this lake a little bit. Now, I'm being really rules lawyery with the way the words are set in the rulebook, that right now, Pskov is technically controlled by the Axis. The Soviets have not entered that hex. They do project a Zok into that hex, but here's the thing. I have to put markers in cities or towns that could act as a intermediate supply source. You trace whether or not you have a supply line by tracing from your hex to an ultimate supply source, and you don't count the hex you start in. Now, if the rules had specified something like an enemy Zok on an empty hex disrupts it, and some games that work like this make that kind of statement, that would mean we couldn't use Pskov for this purpose. But the rules don't say that. And so because that Zok is on the hex we're tracing from, but not in hexes we're tracing through, I believe I'm allowed to use that hex as an OKH marker holder. So there you go. The Germans will find a way to do something to help save the situation. So that's what we're going to do. And those are mostly going to be our pullback areas. Everywhere else down the line is basically related to forming a new line that doesn't have Soviets already in it to try to defend. So these guys, we're giving up hope. They're gone. But we can clean this up, pull back here, and then try to bring these guys forward and create some kind of new line to defend after all those catastrophic losses. That's my thinking anyway. So we've done our purchase and placement, and now I'll take care of the Axis action phase. Because I used all of my points over here, it means that the Axis will not be counterattacking in the west. I would really have liked to clean up the Yugoslavian partisans here, but I can't spare the command points. I can't spend the command logistics to do a major offensive against partisans in Yugoslavia. I will say I really appreciate that this game does what it's doing with Yugoslavia, that there are partisan units. More will come on the board when Italy surrenders. That actually lines up with the history that, like, as Italian troops left Yugoslavia, they couldn't garrison it anymore, and you had these partisan groups that were able to better organize and put the Germans at risk in these areas, and all kinds of craziness went on. And this is, excuse me, I think is one of the strengths of the game. This goes back to what I said in a previous video, where, like, if you don't need to design a system to accommodate 39 to 42, you can focus a system on looking at and organizing your Chrome and rules and everything around that 43 to 45 time period, and include some stuff that is a little bit harder to portray in other games that have a more all-inclusive design. Like, you can have Yugoslavian partisans in any old game, sure, but that has to be some kind of special Chrome that is different than the way partisans work in other countries, because there were distinct things that happened in Yugoslavia. So do you spend a lot of your game game material components and effort on having some kind of special Yugoslavian thing where, like, there's not some, like, integrated partisan system you have to deal with, like maybe in World in Flames. Here, because it's a smaller scope of what you need to portray, you can simply have one little paragraph that says, oh, Yugoslavia works like this, and it works pretty well, and can portray the way the Yugoslavian partisan movement and Allied support and all that kind of stuff happened in Yugoslavia from 43 to 44 to 45. So just a neat little thing that I do like. So I'm going to take care of all of our movement. I doubt we're going to have any combats, but if we do, I'll talk about them. But I think everything here is really all about try to get guys out of here. I also think that these two guys are going to be eliminated, almost certainly. So what can you do? All right, we'll be back. Okay, so here we are after the Axis operational phase. I'm not doing any combats, but for the most part, you can kind of see where the new line is. And zoom in a little bit. We sort of collected ourselves north of that lake. That lake's really important because it saves us several hexes of units, so we at least have a focal point to defend on if we have to, and we can retreat. We would try to pull back to Riga and give them to Lenin. I mean, I don't think there's much we can do about that. For now, we've got some doubled up hexes here. We can hold something. This guy over here is probably doomed, but it depends on what the Soviets might try to do. These guys over here are very likely doomed. If we can get to the Axis exploitation segment, the armor unit there could maybe slip out and get to the German lines, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. Then you can kind of see, like, we have to figure out how we block around the marshes. So the tricky thing is that, like, the Soviet armor are going to be able to have supply out to a certain point where they could get out of the marshes, but if we can defend the hexes around it, they can't, they'll reach a point where they can only go so far without being out of supply, and then they would attrit away. So as long as we can put something there and just block the towns and cities outside the marshes, then the Soviets won't have easy supply access, and we can hold something, right? And that's the same reason why I have these units over here, and then the line picks back up again down here. It's probably less than ideal, but that's like where I could get units in the movement that I had, enough that we are at least covering most of the areas of concern, such that these guys are going to have a hard time making headway. What's going to be really important for us is, like, we still have guys in Crimea that are in supply, but we'll probably lose those guys as well. But there's just not much we can do for them now. They're cut off. They'll have to fight as best they can. And then we're going to have a lot of these guys simply go poof and go away. So I don't think there's much that we can do. Oh, right. And yeah, okay, so these guys are definitely going to go poof because the attrition segment comes before Axis exploitation. So I don't think there's much more we can do to save that situation. It's going to be effed. That's just our reality, unfortunately. So there you go. There's that. Okay, so I think with that being done, we have Allied reaction stuff. So if we look at the Allies, I think what they're going to just do is they're going to have some, well, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. They're going to do movement into this hex east of Gala. Now we're at maximum stacking. We can't get the paratroopers in. I don't think they stacked for free. But we have a 14 combat strength. We can attack with that stack, and I'm looking at attacking Syracuse. So what would be the combat modifiers there? Let's see. The terrain is such that we would have +1 defense factor for the swamp, and then the city is another defense factor. So 2 added to this would be 5, and then I don't think the Luftwaffe has any other bonuses we can really make use of. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that affects that would be helpful to them. And I don't see anything. I just need to double check. No, I guess I don't see anything that would help them here. So it would effectively just be, if I'm reading this right, it would be 14 to 5. 14 to 5, and that's it. That's what it seems like. We don't get any other bonuses. We could potentially try to do something with the paratroopers, but we'll leave them alone for now. I think we can make something happen here. So it'd be 2 to 1. This unit has 2 steps, so we want to at least do that many. So yeah, this is just straight die roll on the 2 to 1 table. We rolled a 6, so that is an EX result. Capital EX, all defending steps eliminated, attacker loses equal number of steps, advance possible. So this unit is destroyed. On the Axis side, we need to take some step losses. I think what we'll do is we'll just have 2 reduced strength units. 2 reduced strength units, and then they'll advance. Rather than eliminate a whole unit, it'll be easier to keep them here. And then we still have basically, blocks in place where we're not going to lose any supply. These guys are going to go poof. And that means we've taken Syracuse, so that the Axis could try to counterattack later, but they just don't have the ability to do it. So there we go. Syracuse has fallen. We can look at that Commonwealth landing, maybe for Athens later. That might be the thing to try. And then the rest of these dudes can start heading up Italy. So there we go. We are set. And we'll probably, I guess what I'm sacrificing here is to make sure we hold Syracuse with 2 units that have decent strength factors. We're missing out on our ability to attack that unit and knock some more guys loose, but maybe we'll have some additional capability to do something there. Not sure. Anyway, good stuff. We are in pretty good shape. I feel like it's all good stuff. So that was the Western Allied reaction, and then we're going to have the Soviet, and I'm not sure what they're going to do, so I'll probably take myself off camera and figure out just what reaction the Soviets can manage here. For lack of a better, sure option, I just had some units do reaction movement into Kiev. I'm pretty sure I could do that. I'm not sure if there's anything else keeping me from doing it. I need to double check that. An unoccupied hex, so we could pick Kiev. So via reaction, the Germans had vacated Kiev. We've taken Kiev. Now the reason why I did that is so that at the beginning of the Soviet activity phase, that is a launching point. Now we won't be able to make use of it as a city because of the weather being winter, but that's a good pickup. And then the rest of these guys, when they move forward, 1, 2, 3, 4 from Kiev actually puts us over there. So we could put a 4 marker in Kiev. We could put some of these other markers in various places. So I think we're in good shape. I think as the Axis, they had to give up Kiev because it was just going to be too easy for these guys to hop out of Gamel over here and just cut Kiev out of supply anyway and eliminate it and take it. So I don't know. This is the classic East Front challenge. When do you give up land? When do you pull back? Do you play space for time? I think the Germans need an opportunity to replace all the units that they're about to lose. I think that's the reality. Okay, so now is the attrition phase. So, who all is out of supply? Well, that's pretty easy to determine. This guy's out of supply. This guy's out of supply. This is several infantry steps lost, by the way. Out of supply, those guys are gone. Kervoyrog, out of supply. These guys are out of supply. I'm reasonably sure they're out of supply. Yeah, because of the Zocs, and they just can't do anything about it. So, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 Axis steps eliminated due to attrition being cut off and surrendering, of which just 1 was an armor step, but that's still pretty catastrophically bad for the Axis. Okay, now the Axis exploitation movement. Well, what is there to do with exploitation movement at the moment? Not a lot. That much could be said. I think what we'll do is there will be... Oh, right, and we can only do it if we had an okay... Oh, man, okay. Well, I don't think there's anything we can do. Nothing that I want to do. I think we're as set up and as good as we're going to get. So, no Axis exploitation movement. And we do our cleanup, which will just be these OKH markers going away. And that's all we've got. So now we're going to kick it over to the Allied side of the turn, basically. And we're going to have our chafe placement. I do think I am going to end up moving a chafe marker. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 4 chafe marker. I'm going to move over here. I believe I can do this. I'm going to move this to Syracuse. So why am I doing that? Having this in Syracuse will ensure that we have supply projection further up this way. And when we look at the supply projection for a city, a port city is 2, which is what a beachhead marker is, but we're several hexes to the east, so now we could, in theory, be in supply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to there, and still be in general supply. We'll probably need to move some stuff around anyway, you know, but, well, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to do that. I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. We'll leave it there for now. That just kind of helps cover our bases. We're basically getting supply through the whole schema, and Commonwealth can get supply from that chafe marker now, because it's not on a particular beachhead or anything. It's just out in the city. The Allies control it. We're projecting plenty of supply down this way. We still have other chafe markers we could be using but aren't using, so I think we're okay through all of that. Yeah, we're good to go. Okay, Allied movement step. I don't think there's a whole lot that they can do in terms of movement. Yeah, I don't really see any point in doing any additional movement for the moment. So I think they're good there. Well, actually, we'll move this paratrooper unit in with the French unit so that we can maybe attack this German guy and maybe knock something loose there. That might be valuable. Okay, got that. And then we have the Soviet operational. This happens all before combat. So we got to do our Stavka placement and Soviet movement. So I'll take care of that off camera, and we'll come back and see what's up. Okay, so here we are after the combat. The Allies ended up... I decided to do the movement, and then we did combat. Due to my Stavka placement, I couldn't do attacks everywhere I really wanted to, but I was able to do enough attacks that I think we're still doing pretty good. Maybe still behind schedule in some places, but I think we're going to do all right. The Allies didn't attack that one mountaineer unit in Sicily just because if we effed it up, we would allow the Axis to do some kookiness where they could try to take Gela and keep Italy from falling this turn or into next turn. So we took the point of caution, and that'll just mean the Axis can try to retreat back across the straits into Italy proper. But that's just the rub of it. We attacked a couple of places. Crimea is pretty much opened up. We're going to likely knock them out of supply and cause all kinds of problems, very likely, so we'll see what happens there. Up through here, just with the movement and trying to get things set up where we don't create any lines or gaps in our line, we didn't move all the way up in every place, and our Stavka limit meant we couldn't attack very many places either, but you can see like we're working our way through and the whole way up the line. And just the very last combats that mattered is we're starting to push into the lake side here, and we cleared up north. So Tallinn could be captured relatively easily from here. It's going to force the Axis to have to pull back all the way to Riga at this rate. I mean, that's what they really need to try to do. So, yeah. I mean, even with just using the town side of our Stavka markers, we were still able to get enough units attacking that it ended up being valuable. And agonizingly, we couldn't kill that guy because we didn't have enough units where I felt comfortable trying to make the attack. Okay, well, there's the sort of normal stuff. Now we have Axis reaction. Well, I think the German West Axis reaction is going to be pretty straightforward. I think what we're going to do, the problem is, I don't know if he can get there, is I do want to get across the strait, but it would cost 1, 2, 3. He could only get back to Messina. Well, we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll react move our one unit that was in Sicily that can survive back to back there. The Italian units almost doesn't matter if I pull them back; they're going to go poof anyway. So I think that's the best we could hope for. Our eastern reaction, I think that's the tough thing. If there's even anything that we can try to do. We just don't have a lot of options. I'm trying to see. I think we'll do a reaction move where 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to try to react move this guy up a little bit. That is probably the best thing I can do, just to help ensure we've got something in place to try to help hold the Soviets back. The maybe only other thing I could have tried to do was get a unit. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. maybe we do that instead. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we do that just as a holding action so that they can't exploit too far. I don't know. Okay, so then we have Allied Soviet exploitation. I don't think there's a whole lot more we can really do. We could try to just say like, oh, we're going to move like that in Sicily and move, go bop, bop. And let's see, we can move him like that or something, I guess. Technically the paratroopers are not mechanized. We could move these guys like so, and then makes it easier for us to come over here. And these guys are going to be healed up before combat, the next combat, I guess. So, I don't know. I don't think it actually does anything other than maybe we open up some hexes so more guys can come in. I don't know. Exploitation movement over here. Well, I don't know. It's got to be within range of Stavka, which is a real problem. That's kind of where our real challenge is going to be. But I think it makes sense to try. We're going to have to watch our infrastructure. We do have Zhytomyr, which is really important, so we could do like 1, 2, 3, 4. And he's actually, I could do like that and move this guy here. That guy there. 1, 2, 5, 8. Now that doesn't do me a whole lot of good. I mean, I could do that. Those guys have to stay there. And we don't really have any mechanized up here. So I think that's all we can really do is start to move forward a little bit more and just start to cause more problems for the Axis. We're nearly at Romania, I guess. Okay, so that's the exploitation phase over. Now we have the strategic transit. I'm really not sure we even have any strategic transit that we would want to do right now. I mean, other than if we pulled guys off the West Front. I think what's really more concerning is that we've got to figure out what we're going to do with Yugoslavia, because soon we're going to have missing units. Yeah, I don't know that the Axis has any transit movements they really want to do. Because here's the thing, if we start pulling stuff off the West, that just means we have less guys for the West Front, period, anyway. And I don't want to leave an obvious landing zone open, because that's just going to make it easier for the Allies to do what they need to do in the West. So to me, it's just a matter of saying like, where can we go that will allow us to operate effectively. I do have an issue that once the Allies, or once Italy surrenders, we're going to have a bunch of open hexes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transit one unit out of the Northwest Theater and put them into Naples, so that Naples can't be taken super easily in Italy. So there, just plugged one guy. That's maybe as much as we can do. I suspect that, my allied self is going to be looking at these hexes, around here, because there's going to be a greater opening to operate, right? And it just seems like that's something we're going to have to watch out for. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. I think they're done. Allied strategic movement. Well, now that we're actually into we're actually in the continent. I have a thought on like, okay, when we can invade next, are we going to be trying to hit somewhere in Italy, or are we going to shoot for somewhere in Greece, or what? But I think what we'll do is we will transit a unit into Syracuse, a Commonwealth unit, the Polish unit actually, so we at least have somebody operating, and they can draw supply from the Schaeff marker in the city, so they're good to go for stacking and all that kind of stuff. So they're good there. And what else? Maybe that's it. The Soviets, I don't think the Soviets have much that they can strat move that would be of value. Nothing that they don't already have or set up for already. Maybe we pull something out of Gamel and plug it somewhere further along the line. That would maybe be the obvious thing. Maybe do that from Gamel to Vitebsk and assume Gamel is pretty safe at this point. Maybe that's all we do. Yeah, I think that's good enough. Everything else, I mean, we've got stuff in front lines that they're pretty good. Okay, victory point segment. Did we get any other victory hexes? I think we did. I just forgot to mark it. So there's, when I look at the count, there's Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov, Kiev, that's 3. Then we have this northern one is 4. So I think we are at 4 victory points, all from the Soviets at the moment. And that's it. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's turn 4. Looking to finish this up, I noticed I was getting some comments on my swamp in Italy, Sicily video. Honestly, I feel like there's somebody, not naming names, who cares more about this than I do. But ultimately, on some of the points I was making, sounds like there's some agreement and interpretation. So I don't know. I don't feel the need to argue this. Ted Racer is the designer, and there's somebody else, or the Paul Shackleton is the game developer, and some other folks did the map. So, I mean, take the fight up with them, I guess. I don't know. But ultimately, it seems like the swamp hexes are really representing swamps, wetlands, canal structure works, lots of rivers and small constrained places. However, which way you want to look at it, it's a wetlands hex, and that can mean a lot. And it seems like the primary purpose of the wetlands hex, the swamp hexes, is to limit exploitation movement. Because if I look at Syracuse, if it was instead a rough hex, instead of a swamp, what's the difference? The only functional difference is that it cost 1 extra movement point during exploitation and reaction movement to move through Syracuse. So interpret that any which way you like. If the band of land between the steep hills of Sicily and the coast, and that's the route that you need to travel on to get from here to up here, and the only way through there is kind of a swampy, wetland, marshy mess, then yeah, it makes sense that it costs extra for mechanized forces to move through it. I mean, I don't think that's a huge dramatic thing to have as a game device here. But I don't know. I don't feel the need to defend the game on that purpose alone. I'm fine with it. My gripes with the game so far are that I sometimes can't tell the difference between a major river and a minor river, and sometimes I can't tell rough versus mountain in a couple of spots. And really my issue there is that I know people who have either color blindness or problems differentiating blue and green, and they could have some issues in interpreting some of the map colors here. So I don't know. That's just the one thing that's bugging me. Mechanically, the game so far has seemed, it's fine. It is playing well. I think we're getting the east front under control a little bit as the Axis. We're at least able to define a front line now, but the Soviets are going to keep hammering it. And I don't know. It's going to go poorly somewhere along the way. We're getting into tougher terrain, which is going to slow the Soviets down. They're going to have a lot harder combat die rolls now, and their replacement rate is getting smaller. So we should see things maybe firm up on the east front. I don't know. We'll see. So, okay, guys, that's it for turn 4. I got to go, but thanks for watching. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, keep gaming.